Hello, everyone. This is Peter Vogopoulos from FirepoleMarketing.com, and this is part of our Productive Marketing interview series. Today, I am very pleased to interview Joshua Fields Millburn, one of the founders of the website The Minimalists, with his partner Ryan Nicodemus. And in that site, they show people how to live more meaningful lives with less stuff. And obviously, they've struck a chord with a lot of people because they have over 10,000 monthly readers who visit their site and read their essays. And they're a pleasure to read, let me say so. You've got essays on getting rid of stuff, and how most of it's useless, and how minimalism can solve your money problems and help you lose weight and give you more time and just simplify your life. Hey, that's a good book title actually. How minimalism can solve your money problems, help you lose weight, give you more time, and simplify your life. You should write one, but you've got a book already, or three actually. And that's it. They have been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about their essays, and their essays have been featured on a lot of popular blogs, including Zen Habits. And they've authored three books, all three of which have climbed onto Amazon's top 10 bestseller lists in their respective categories. And the latest book, Minimalism: Live a Meaningful Life, and you could download that for Kindle or for your PC. We'll talk about that a little later. Welcome, Joshua. How are you?
Outstanding. Thanks for having me, Peter.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'd like to really start off with just a little bit of a discussion about minimalism because I think many people have heard about it and sort of understand it a little bit conceptually, but a lot of times it seems to get confused with I'm living like a hobo or a penniless vagabond or like a monk, and I deny myself modern day pleasures and conveniences like owning a microwave. Can you clarify and set that record straight for us? What's it all about?
Absolutely. I started this journey sort of accidentally about 2 years ago. My mother had passed away, and it was a really traumatic event in my life. And I started looking at everything in my life and just realizing that while I had what was considered by many the American dream, it wasn't necessarily making me happy. All the
Mm-hmm.
things that my culture told me were supposed to make me happy didn't actually bring me happiness. They brought me debt and anxiety and stress and guilt and all these things that were just really overwhelming. And by age 28, 29, I figured out, you know what, there has to be something else. I didn't know exactly what it was. And then I stumbled across this concept called minimalism. There's this guy, his name's Colin Wright, actually. He runs a website called Exile Lifestyle. And we've become good friends in the last couple of years. But he had this idea of minimalism, and he said he was a minimalist. And I said, you know what, I don't know what that is, but I think I'm in. And so I started just really questioning all my stuff, all the stuff I had. Why did we accumulate all of these things? Because it got to the point where I had so much stuff, I was accumulating things. I didn't really know what was important in my life. I didn't know what to focus on to live a happier, more content life. And so for me, getting rid of the stuff allowed me to focus on what is important, things like my health, my relationships. I mean, if you think about it, we forsake our relationships every day. We spend 60, 70, 80 hours a week at work, and then the people we love, the people who are closest to us, we don't necessarily spend the time with them that they deserve. Things like our health. I weighed 70 pounds more than I do now. At 30, I'm in the best shape of my life, and that feels great. But before, I didn't have time to focus on my health. Um, I set it on the back burner. Things like pursuing what I'm passionate about. I didn't hate my job. In fact, I was really good at it, but I wasn't really passionate about it either. So I sort of found an exit plan over time. A few other things. Growing as an individual is something that's really important to me, and I felt like I wasn't really growing when I was accumulating all these things. In fact, stuff was preventing me from growing.
Mm.
And one of the most important things that we tend to talk a lot about is contributing beyond ourselves. There are so many ways to give back to other people, but when there's so much stuff in the way, you don't feel like you have the time or maybe even the means to help other people out, to give back to other people. So minimalism for me was pretty much a tool to prioritize my life so I could focus on those things, those important things, as opposed to focusing on stuff.
I think fundamentally no one can argue with the idea of focusing on the important things. What you're advocating, I guess, or what you are espousing with minimalism is, okay, I'm going to simplify my life so that I have time to focus on the important things, or that I focus on the important things. I don't let all these other things become distractions and detract my attention from all these important things. Um, but what about the hardest part, I guess, which comes with the concept of minimalism, which is, I guess, possessions and stuff and things,
Sure.
ownership, which is really what I think everybody seems to worry about when they say, yeah, minimalism. It's an interesting concept. I'd love to simplify my life, but I do need my this and I do need my that, and and I do identify this exact topic was discussed in your colleague Ryan's blog post, which I encourage everybody to read, and lots of other great essays that you guys have on your site. Minimalism, I think you said it best. Minimalism scares the shit out of us. So for those of us who for whom minimalism scares the shit out of, how do we reconcile all that? How can we reconcile the stuff part and the simplifying stuff, which fundamentally we agree with?
Yeah, it's funny because I was certainly the same way when I took this on. I think we tie a lot of our identity to our stuff, right? We become our stuff, and so the big house,
The car.
having more bedrooms than inhabitants. I mean, we tend to do that. It's why do I have a three-bedroom house but I have two people living there, or why do I have two cars when I need one or maybe need none? Because we don't tend to question our things. So it's really scary at first because our identity's tied up in it. I always tell people there's three ways that they can approach minimalism. Because the there is a suitable way to do it for just about anyone. The most radical way is, you know what, you can rent a gigantic dumpster and throw as much stuff in there as you can fit, right? Just get rid of all your stuff and move on with your life. Um, while that sounds great, I know with me that wouldn't have worked because uh, I just had too much tied up emotionally in much of the stuff, especially
Hmm.
when it comes to sentimental items, which sometimes are the hardest to get rid of. Yeah, I wrote a fairly long essay about getting rid of my mother's stuff after she died, and for me that was really difficult. Getting rid of some of the sentimental items. So I don't think everyone can just take all their stuff and throw it into a dumpster. Then there's the other side of the spectrum. For people who are really trepidatious about this thing, the best thing I usually recommend is but start somewhere small. You can start in one room, a small room, a bathroom. Start anywhere. The key component though is getting some momentum, right? So you want to start somewhere, whether that's your guest room, your kitchen, wherever, and start with that in mind, and then move forward to the bigger tasks as you get momentum. The third way is sort of somewhere in between. It's what we did with Ryan's condo. Actually, we packed up all his stuff. We did what we call a packing party, and we wrote about it on the site and did this whole 21-day journey thing. But basically, with Ryan, we just packed up all his stuff and pretended he was moving, even though he wasn't, right? And so he had this entire living room, floor to ceiling, filled with boxes, and we packed up literally everything. The toothbrush, all his silverware, everything was packed up. His furniture, we packed everything. And then as he used stuff, he unpacked it. So only as he needed it did he unpack it. And after about 3 weeks, 21 days, it's amazing to see how much stuff he still had left. About 80% of his stuff was still sitting there. And we didn't even know what it was. There were boxes marked miscellaneous number 7 or junk drawer number 2. And there's all this stuff. And you just start to wonder, why did I accumulate all this stuff? And then, two, why am I holding on to it? So that was sort of a middle of the road way to do it. But I think any of those three ways will work as long as you start to take action.
Joshua, it's funny you say that, and that really struck a chord with me. I have, I'd say, about 5 or 6, maybe a few more. Maybe I'm being conservative about that number. 5 or 6 boxes at my parents' basement, which I left there like a long time ago when I was between places, way before I got married. I've been married for over 5 years now. So I think whatever's in those boxes I really don't need. And I've been thinking about going to get them. My wife is like, why don't you just go and just put them straight into the garbage? Because whatever's in there you really don't need. If you haven't
Right.
needed them in 5 years. But I find that hard. And I really do. So is there hope for somebody like me?
I think so. One rule that I tend to go by, and it was something we tested out this year because we've been on this book tour. We've been doing a 33 city book tour that's been really amazing. But a theory that we've tested out is we didn't pack any what we call just in case items. Like I didn't pack
Ah,
anything just in case I need it, right? And I think this applies to holding on to stuff like that too, because you're holding on to that stuff just in case you want it later, right? Because you're not using it now. You're not saying, well, it's in my parents' basement because I'm using it every day. No, it's there just in case, and I think we do that with a lot of our stuff. So there's this theory that we tested, and it's worked 99% of the time. We call it the 2020 theory. Anything that you get rid of, 99% of the time, you'll be able to replace it for less than $20, less than 20 minutes from where you live. And we've only had to do that a couple times. Most of the stuff we get rid of, we never really realize it, you know. But occasionally, if you have to replace something, it's not really going to cost you that much money, and it's going to be out of the way, and life gets a lot easier when the stuff's out of the way.
I love your 2020 rule. That's really cool. And I probably, I really honestly, if I look around, probably my house, there's probably nothing that I cannot replace in less than 20 minutes. So
Right.
cool rule. Uh, let's talk about something more, a little bit more towards something that'll tie into what we're doing this month here at Firepole Marketing, which is Productive Marketing Month. And we are approaching sort of like the whole discussion about productive marketing as how can we be more productive in doing the stuff we need to do for our business, which I think ties great with the idea of simplifying and just making sure that we don't get overwhelmed by our stuff. And
Right.
if I were to point to one spot, I think, which causes a lot of concern and a lot of headache for people, I'd say it's the ever-present and overflowing email inbox.
Sure. Sure.
That
I actually I used to work a corporate job for 12 years, same company. I was director of operations for a really large corporation, and I can tell you that's one of the things that I struggled with for the longest time was focusing on something besides my inbox because
yeah,
that becomes where you become trapped, right? You get trapped because it's constant flow, a barrage of information. And then your BlackBerry is supposed to make you more productive, or your iPhone, or whatever. And what it just happens to become is an appendage, and it's a really troublesome topic. So yeah, I'm definitely glad to talk to you about it.
I'm glad too because I actually call my BlackBerry the leash, which is apt but probably pretty sad.
Sure.
The I think that if there was, I mean, like you said, you when you were working at your job, you lived out of your inbox. I mean, a lot of people I think live out of their inbox, and they it's their central point of attention, and it's a horrible point of attention because it just keeps on, you know, filling up, and we keep on using our cup to try to empty it, and the thing keeps on filling up, and it's causing us stress, and it's causing us a whole bunch of headache, and there seems to be no way out of it. Yet, if we could somehow maybe apply the concept of minimalism to this, maybe we could find some solutions here. And I know you have written a great essay on your website called Inbox Minimalism, and I thought we'd talk about this topic a little bit. So where does somebody start? They're getting 200 messages a day, and they don't see an end to this. You know, what do we do?
Sure, sure. Again, I take the same approach I just took earlier when I say approaching minimalism, and I think you can do that for your inbox as well. There's a really drastic solution that I've done, but I don't think this is necessarily for everyone. So we'll talk about some other things as well. I think the most drastic thing you can do, and at least try it out and see if it works for you, test it out. Because if it doesn't, you can always go back to the hideous inbox you have right now is get a new email address and
Uh,
ignore the old one. Contact the people who you really need to contact, and it's going to be a pain in the butt. It's going to take you, 3, 4 hours to change your subscriptions to all this and that and whatever. But if you get a new email address, uh, instantly it's going to eliminate a ton of email. Now, some people that are with corporation that can't necessarily do that, then there are some other things that I'm going to recommend. First off, get rid of anything that doesn't add value to your life. So if you're getting subscriptions to particular things, get rid of them. Mark them spam, unsubscribe, do whatever you need to do to get rid of them. If it's not adding value to your life, find out a way to get rid of it. To me, that was the biggest thing that I was able to do back in the corporate world was determine what was value adding and what was essentially junk. Because as you mentioned, 200 emails a day, that was pretty standard. But how much of them contained important information? Maybe 20, 40 on a really good day, and the rest of it was stuff that didn't need to suck my attention, but it did because even the junk I had to at least look at it and determine what to do with it, right? So that killed my creativity. It killed a lot of time to be productive, and so once I figured out what was not valuable, I found ways to get rid of it. Now, sometimes that meant, well, some people are sending me stuff that's not valuable. It's not like I'm getting spam necessarily, but it may be, Peter keeps sending me this weekly newsletter that's really not adding value, or he's sending me all these emails for clarification. Let's set up a different thing between Peter and I so that we can find something that is a lot more valuable for us and doesn't eat away at us constantly sending back correspondence through email. And really what I think that takes is for me at least, it took a few conversations with some people to say, here's my new expectation. And that's not always easy. And
Right. Yeah.
it takes sitting down with someone over a cup of coffee or lunch and saying, hey, you know what? Here's what I'm trying to do with my life. I'd like for you to help me out because ultimately I want to be more productive. I want to be happier. I want more time for this, this, and this. Do you think you could help me? I would only like to send emails this way or for this reason. And I found that if you approach people like that and show them how it'll also add value to their life, I think they're willing to hop on board because they're probably stuck in the same rut that you are in terms of your inbox. So the big thing, if you had to, I would say change your email address. That's starting from zero, and it's so much easier to start from zero, right? And then going forward, make sure you set the right expectations with people because more than anything else, the people that are communicating with you, I don't think they're trying to bog you down, but unfortunately, they are bogging you down, and they don't necessarily realize it.
The two things that came to mind when you were saying all that. One of them was it seemed to me that the emails that you're describing, the ones that are just extraneous and aren't necessary, they're kind of like what you were talking about earlier. They're the just in case emails, aren't they? Like are being communicated with just in case, or I'm getting just in case I need to know this later, or I'm getting this email just in case there's information in it that I need to. The second thing I wanted to ask you is that always a win-win for people? I mean, you talked about asking somebody to sort of reconfigure the way they're communicating with you, which I suppose if as long as that's valuable to them too and it saves them time, will probably work out. Is that
Right.
usually the way it works out, or is that more of a selfish thing? Hey, I need you to talk to me this way because I need to be more productive, but it may not actually make your life any easier. Does that usually not work out that way, or usually is it really a win-win?
Well, again, I think it's a win-win because instead of approaching it that way, the way I usually would approach it would be, let's figure out a situation that works for both of us. Here is what I'm trying to do, but let's find a way that we can both communicate and it adds value to both of our lives still. Because right now, the way that you're communicating with me may be completely appropriate for you, but for me, it doesn't work. It's just like if you're in a relationship and one person yells all the time, the other person's quiet. I don't necessarily think that's going to work most of the time. And so coming to some sort of common ground is something that you want to do as soon as possible because really it's about how valuable is the communication between the two of you. And if both of you aren't finding value, then it's not very valuable communication anyway.
Okay. And aside from paring it down, just really putting every single email you receive through the lens of is this adding value, or putting every communication with important people through the lens of is this the most effective and efficient communication we could do. Is there anything else that we would need to do in order to try our hand at inbox minimalism? Is there any sort of tool or app or filter or rule or anything of that sort that you think will help us, or is that just like counter to the whole philosophy of minimalism?
No, I don't think it's countered. I mean, I can tell you about some of the things that I do. I mean, I use Gmail now, and I found that a lot of the filters that are built into Gmail, filters and folders, can help you out. So it really depends on your individual needs, and I've got some stuff on our website that you're welcome to look at that talks a little bit more about that in depth. But the other thing is, I've found that I set up rules for myself. Like I won't carbon copy in anyone because I don't want to add to the clutter, right? I won't send out group emails unless you're like subscribed to our website and you get our essays once or twice a week.
Right.
Other than that, I'm not going to send out just a mass email. Unless it's truly appropriate. I can count on one hand in the last year that I've sent out a mass email to people. But generally I don't want to add to the clutter. So I say set up some rules that are appropriate to you because you can only expect that from others if you expect it from yourself first.
That's a great rule to live by. Uh, I talked about this a little bit for just a second, and you talked about okay, filters and some things are good. In general, do you apply the concept of minimalism when it comes to all these tools and apps and systems and stuff? I've got more tools and more apps than I could count. I use a zillion of them for my business, which I've always thought makes things easier for me.
Sure.
When does it go from simplifying life to complicating life?
Sure. It's interesting because yeah, we've been taught for the longest time that more equals more, but then you get too much of more and it becomes a really big problem, right?
Uh-huh.
So I know for me that um, some apps are really, really useful, and you'll hear me talk about these two words, adding value, a lot because that was a thing that was one of the things that helped me really embrace minimalism was finding what was valuable and meaningful in my life. But the apps that we have, I think some of them can be great. They're great tools if we get caught up in them and they're not really adding value to what we're doing. Then that's where they become problematic. It becomes problematic when we don't question it. We don't ask the question, is this adding value to what I'm doing? Or is there a better way to do what I'm doing? Because we get stuck in that routine, that pattern. And that's easy because sometimes we don't want to sit back and be aware that maybe there's a better solution because it takes some real conscious thought to analyze what you're doing, whether it's in the work environment or at home or whatever. It becomes really difficult to think about that stuff when you can just stay in the pattern. The problem with staying in the pattern is you're not able to change anything. If you're not changing anything, you're probably not growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. So.
Well said. Uh, in another one of the interviews that I did for Productive Marketing Month, I actually interviewed someone who I won't let out of the bag just yet because your interview is probably going to go up before I've interviewed that person, and it's going to be a bit of a surprise. But we talked about the concept of satisficers and maximizers. And we talked about the concept in the context of seeking out stuff. So, there's a whole lot of people who will spend a whole lot of time trying to find a great app or the best app or maximizing the app or let's find another app and let's find another app or let's find another system. So we're wasting a lot of mental energy expend doing the research when really we should be just getting on with it. So a satisficer is the sort of person who says, okay, I found something that suits my needs and I'm going for it. A maximizer is the one who says, did I really seek out everything and all the options and did I choose the best one? And then,
Right.
it can be applied to any sort of purchase we make, from buying a TV to choosing an app to do our invoicing. Uh, how do you reconcile those two? What are your thoughts about those two? I don't know if you've heard about them before, but how do you relate to those in terms of the philosophy of minimalism?
I think it's interesting. I think minimalism is maybe a third option inside of that. To me, I go back and I look at the why instead of it seems to me like we're talking about the what here. And I'll use a really generic example that you just talked about, like buying a TV, right? So instead of figuring out which TV to buy,
Why do I need
maybe
a TV?
yeah, why do I need the TV? Why do I want it? How much value is it going to add to my life? Or is there a way that I can add value in a different way to my life that's going to actually be a lot more fulfilling, that I'm going to feel more satisfied with afterwards? And if the answer is yes, then I'm going to do that. If the answer is no, TV is the way to go because of X, Y, and Z, then great. I'm not demonizing TV. I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with it. But I like to ask the question why. Like, what's the purpose behind this before I even think about what the tool is? Because I think that we always think about minimalism as this decluttering thing, and I think that's the initial bite at the apple. But really, what I think minimalism does is it gets down to the core. It asks you why. What's the purpose of what I'm doing, and is it meaningful? And then you can look at the tool, and sure, whether you're maximizing it or you are just happy with the tool that you have and you keep moving forward. I think either one of those can be okay options as long as you know why you're doing what you're doing.
More high level now. Suppose somebody who's listening to this video says, you know what, I'd like to give this minimalism thing a try, and
Sure.
my life is too complex. I would love to simplify things. Uh, how do they take that first bite of the apple, as you say? What should be their first step? Should it be figuring out this why, or should it be asking the fundamental whys of life, or should it be just something else? What do you think? Where do they start?
I think, I think getting rid of the stuff helped me ask those whys. Um, because first, if you have a million inputs, it's hard to discern which ones of those are important, right? Because if there's 500,000 discrete bits of information coming at you each day, as statistics show, and maybe 25 of those are really important, how the hell do you know what 25 are important when you've got all this stuff? It's the same thing with all the stuff around you, right? Because we get bogged down with everything. And the three things I talked about earlier, I think the easiest way is to really just start with yourself, because we often put the blame on other people, right? I can't become a minimalist, or I can't make this change in my life or whatever because of the spouse or my kids or my family or my friends or whatever. But really, it's about starting with yourself. I'm not asking you should never try to change anyone else. Make the changes within yourself. And that means if you're talking about paring down your own things, you can start small. You can start in one room of your house and see how it really affects you. And see, by getting some of the stuff out of the way, I always recommend there's three things you can do. You can donate, sell, or throw it away. But take action. And for me, that minimalism scared the shit out of me too, until I took action. And once I took action, I'm like, this is actually pretty easy. Because once you get rid of the stuff, you don't care. It's just stuff.
And did you feel? I'm sure everybody's gonna be curious about the first few rooms that you tackled. Did you feel that sort of, what am I doing here? That trepidation, and how'd you get through that?
I did when I was giving the stuff away. I mean, when you look at it, at your stuff, it's yours, and you've associated it with you, right? And it's a part of you. And for me, I did a few interesting things after we started the website. I, I just want to make sure I wasn't giving too much meaning to stuff. I gave away some of my favorite stuff. So instead of, in that way, anything after that was really easy. Like, I had a favorite pair of shoes I had for a while. I had a favorite shirt, favorite pair of jeans. And then I got to thinking, well, it's just stuff like anything else. And guess what happened? As soon as I got rid of those, another shirt or another pair of shoes stepped up and became my favorite pair. And I don't have a whole lot of stuff now. I've probably got rid of 95% of my stuff. And while that might be drastic for some people, I don't live like a nomad. I mean, I have an apartment with furniture and everything else, but I just don't have a lot of excess. And with the stuff I do have, I enjoy. And what's nice is the stuff that I have now is really good stuff, and I really, really like it. I enjoy it. I like the clothes I own. I like the car I drive. I like the house I live in. I just don't. I don't have this excess stuff that's in the way. So you get rid of the junk, the stuff that you don't need. You get to enjoy the stuff that you love every day.
Wonderful. That sounds really nice, actually.
Peter, this is not hyperbole. I'm being dead honest with you. At age 30, I'm happier than I've ever been.
That's wonderful. I'm really happy for you, Joshua. Let's talk about your new book. You and Ryan have a new book out. It's called Minimalism: Live a Meaningful Life, and it starts off. And the blurb for this starts off asking some really pointed questions. Do you jump out of bed every morning excited about the day in front of you? Do you live a life defined by deep meaning, endless passion, excellent health, empowering relationships, and constant growth? And you conclude that by saying you can. And that's such a wonderful state is within our reach. So tell me about this book and how it can help us achieve all that. Because I don't think there's anybody on the planet who doesn't want what you're talking about here.
Sure.
How does the structure of the book work this?
Well, the book itself is a foreword plus 7 chapters, and it was structured very intentionally. Actually, we spent about a year writing it. Actually, we wrote a different book and decided not to publish it. It was a good book. It was called Minimalism in 21 Days. It was sort of a how-to-ish guide, and it was 300 pages. Now, can you taste the irony there? A minimalism book that's 300 pages. Right? This one is a lot shorter. It's about 125, 130 pages, but it's filled with really meaningful content. We spent about a year writing it, and we first document our journey. So in the very first chapter, we talk about here's here's how everything happened for us. And we talk about some pretty troubling past, whether it's drug use or divorce, uh, a bunch of different things because, we didn't have ideal pasts. We grew up in relatively poor homes. We didn't have great childhoods, but we were able to, at a very young age, sort of work our way up in the corporate world and then get everything that society told us was supposed to make us happy, but it didn't make us happy. By age 28, we were approaching 30 and wondering, well, what do I need now? And then we see a lot of senior executives at the company we were working for, and they weren't necessarily any happier than we were. In fact, some of them were miserable.
The path didn't look too good, did it?
No, and I'm looking. I say, if I work really hard for 15 more years,
that's what I'm going to get.
and that's not what I wanted. That's not where I wanted to be. So, and then it took my mother dying to really start questioning all the stuff in my life. And so in the book, we talk about our journey there. And right after my mother passed away, I just started getting rid of stuff. And I got with Ryan and said, hey, Ryan, I've been doing this whole minimalism simplifying thing, and it's been great. I've been reading some of these websites, and you've got a lot of shit. Would you like to jump on board with me? And he was like, yeah, we've been talking about this happiness thing for a while, and we just haven't been that happy. And so we did, and we decided to document it online, and we got really lucky. I mean, we've got about 100,000 people a month that come to the site now, and it's only been about a year, and it just took off really. It's gone really well, and it's allowed me to do something that I've never been able to do, is pursue my passion, and that's one of the chapters in the book, actually. So I'll run through those real quick. We go through our backstory. That's the first chapter. The next 5 chapters are the 5 dimensions, the 5 most important areas of life, and really it took us getting rid of our stuff to sort of figure these 5 areas out. And we talk about getting rid of all of our anchors and how we got rid of the stuff, and then we identified these 5 areas. The first one being health. That's perfect foundation because, like I mentioned before, I was overweight, I was not healthy, I was eating like crap, and I felt like crap, and that translated to everything else I did. So we talk about, we don't want it to sound like a health book, but we give you some pretty practical tips. We don't advocate any one particular style of living, but we give you, we point you in a direction, allow you to at least explore that, and show you what has actually worked for us physically. What we've been able to do to change our lives. The second of the 5 areas are relationships. We sort of talked about the relationships a moment ago, but we tend to forsake those relationships, and we just discovered that's, if you're not focusing on the people that are important to you, then they're not going to focus on you long term either. It's one of the most meaningful parts of your life that we tend to just skip right over. And then the third area was pursuing your passion. And for me, that was writing fiction. I've always been wanted to write literary fiction. It's what I've wanted to do for a long time, and I finally was able to this last year. Published a short story collection, so that's something I've been really passionate about. We're out doing this book tour now, which has been great. So it's allowed me to pursue that passion that for the longest time I wasn't able to do that. And the last 2 areas I think go hand in hand. We talk about growth and we talk about contribution. Growing as an individual, constant, small improvements every single day. And we talk about ways that people can grow. And then we talk about contributing beyond yourself in a meaningful way. And that's really important. I think we just get stuck and we don't even know how to contribute or what we should do to contribute most of the time. And there's some real simple things you can do locally or even on the web now, which allows you to contribute to other people who really need your help.
So these 5 dimensions that you're talking about, after much introspection, much decluttering, much thinking, you've distilled it down to these 5, and I mean, fundamentally, they sound like they are really the foundations. Let's go over them again. Health, you said relationships, passions, right, growth, and contribution. I have this in my life, and and these dimensions are in order. Then I'm focusing on what's important, and I'm probably going to be a fulfilled, happy person, is what you're saying.
That's exactly it. And that's why I say it's not just about getting rid of your stuff. I think you can get rid of all your stuff, and you've thrown out all your shit, and you can sit in an empty apartment and still be miserable. Mm-hmm. So that's not what it's about. It's about getting rid of life's excess, and a lot of that, especially in our culture, has to do with stuff. Getting rid of that excess so you can focus on what really is important. And those were the things that we found after a lot of introspection, made us happy as individuals. And after really talking to other people and figuring out what made them tick, what made them excited, those were the things as well. And it was those once we identified that, it was like, aha, we've got this answer that works really, really well for us.
How do we retool? Let's take growth for a second. For some people, growth is okay, career advancement.
Sure.
And with career advancement, I mean, you went through that. With career advancement means I can now get stuff which sort of signal my career advancement. The stuff that you so aptly said is what society will tell you will make you happy. So
Sure.
how does somebody in starting this journey sort of retool the very basic thinking that probably exists in their mindset, which is okay, it's about growth is about advancing my career, increasing my salary, getting more stuff, being able to take a more luxurious vacation, driving a more expensive car. I mean, how does that retooling start so that you could start down this path that you're towards happiness that you're describing?
It's interesting. I don't want to demonize the corporate world. Some people are very happy with having a regular corporate job, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So growing in that respect, I think that's fine. If I think your key objective is solely based around monetary gain, then I don't really think that's growth. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not allergic to money, but at the same time, I also realize that is not the key to my happiness. And I was very fortunate to have a six-figure salary at one point in time, and I did really well for myself in my 20s, but it didn't bring me happiness. And I can tell you that is not growth. That is pursuing something that is never going to fulfill you. So growth is about, Tony Robbins has a really interesting analogy or an acronym actually, CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. And it's an interesting acronym and a philosophy that I tend to live by because it's really about these small incremental changes. When I look at my life, I look back at the last 2 years of my life. I've made a lot of really subtle changes over the last 2 years since my mother passed away. Stuff that didn't seem consequential at the time. But all these small little changes, day after day after day, have added up to a lot. Now I can look in life's rear view mirror now, and I can look up and say, "Oh wow, everything back there 2 years ago is so much different than it is today." But it's because of those constant changes, the little small incremental changes. I mean, there are a few things that I've done that are large changes, but to be quite honest with you, the small stuff is really what adds up. People ask me all the time, how can I do what you're doing and be really happy? And they want a quick fix-it answer, and there is not a quick fix-it answer. The answer is it's a lot of really subtle changes over a longer period of time. And when you think about it, in the grand scheme of things, a year to 2 years really isn't that long of a time span, but for some of us, it seems like it's really difficult and insurmountable right up front. But if you make some small changes over a short period of time, you'll start to feel that momentum.
When somebody decides that they want to do this, you said earlier, in getting started, start with yourself and start small and start with one room. Um, you touched upon this a little bit, the whole "what will other people think" sort of
Uh-huh.
topic, right? So I'm going to go down this route, and I
Sure.
think to myself, well, let's say, what's my wife going to think, or what are my coworkers going to think, or what are my neighbors going to think? Or, they're going to look at me and say, "Peter, should we get you some help?" What's your advice? What's your
It's funny
advice to those
to say
people?
that. Ryan and I kind of went a silly way of doing it. We started a website called The Minimalists, so everyone pretty much knew about us pretty quickly what we
Yeah.
were doing, right? We're two best friends, we've known each other for 20 years, and we just wanted to do this thing together. But with most people, I generally say you don't have to tell anyone about it at first. Make some changes in your life, and by the time people notice, you've already gotten so far, they don't even bring it up. They start making the changes in their lives as well. And I've seen it over and over and over. And I still have people that call me now from the old corporate job that we used to work at, and they call me now and they say, "Hey, it looks like you're contributing to Habitat for Humanity this weekend or something like that. Can we join you?" And When you make those subtle changes in your life, you don't even have to tell anyone else about it. They will catch on eventually, and they'll notice what it's doing for you and the happiness it's providing to you, and they'll want a piece of that as well. And they'll be coming to you for advice instead of judging you. Because to be honest, you put yourself out there, some people will really say that's great. I'm all for it, and other people they're going to judge you. So you don't necessarily have to put it all out there.
Final word of wisdom: somebody who wants to sort of like start embracing this topic, resources, support. Where can they go?
Sure, just come to our website. We've got a ton of free content. Theminimalists.com, and like you mentioned, we have 3 books out there as well. But you can come to our website. Everything is on there. We're happy to help you out.
Some great essays. I recommend you guys visit theminimalist.com. There's a little area there. Start here. It gives you a good area for you to get started on the concept. Minimalism: Live a Meaningful Life. The book is available exclusively on Kindle. You can download that as well from theminimalist.com. Joshua, I can't thank you enough for doing this with me. It was really a pleasure to speak with you, really a pleasure to talk about minimalism and get all this clarifying wisdom out of you. It was a wonderful, wonderful time, and I want to thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Peter. It's been great.
Thank you again. And everyone, this was Joshua Millburn and his partner Ryan Nicodemus from the website The Minimalists. And this is Peter Vogopoulos signing off for firepolemarketing.com. This is one of the interviews for Productive Marketing Month. See you on the blog. Thanks. I think many people have heard about it to sort of understand it a little bit conceptually, but a lot of times it seems to get confused with I'm living like a hobo or a penniless vagabond or like a monk, and I deny myself modern day pleasures and conveniences like owning a microwave. Can you clarify and set that record straight for us? What's it all about?
Absolutely. I started this journey sort of accidentally about 2 years ago. My mother had passed away, and it was a really traumatic event in my life. And I started looking at everything in my life and just realizing that while I had what was considered by many the American dream, it wasn't necessarily making me happy. All the
Mm-hmm.
things that my culture told me were supposed to make me happy didn't actually bring me happiness. They brought me debt and anxiety and stress and guilt and all these things that were just really overwhelming. And by age 28, 29, I figured out, you know what, there has to be something else. I didn't know exactly what it was. And then I stumbled across this concept called minimalism. There was this guy, his name's Colin Wright, actually. He runs a website called Exile Lifestyle. And we've become good friends in the last couple of years. But he had this idea of minimalism, and he said he was a minimalist. And I said, you know what, I don't know what that is, but I think I'm in. And so I started just really.
Hello, everyone. This is Peter Vogopoulos from FirepoleMarketing.com, and this is part of our Productive Marketing interview series. Today, I am very pleased to interview Joshua Fields Millburn, one of the founders of the website The Minimalists, with his partner Ryan Nicodemus. And in that site, they show people how to live more meaningful lives with less stuff. And obviously, they've struck a chord with a lot of people because they have over 10,000 monthly readers who visit their site and read their essays. And they're a pleasure to read, let me say so. You've got essays on getting rid of stuff, and how most of it's useless, and how minimalism can solve your money problems and help you lose weight and give you more time and just simplify your life. Hey, that's a good book title actually. How minimalism can solve your money problems, help you lose weight, give you more time, and simplify your life. You should write one, but you've got a book already, or 3 actually. And that's it. They have been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about their essays, and their essays have been featured on a lot of popular blogs, including Zen Habits. And they've authored 3 books, all 3 of which have climbed onto Amazon's top 10 bestseller lists in their respective categories. And the latest book, Minimalism: Live a Meaningful Life, and you could download that for Kindle or for your PC. We'll talk about that a little later. Welcome, Joshua. How are you?
Outstanding. Thanks for having me, Peter.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'd like to really start off with just a little bit of a discussion about minimalism because
Time or maybe even the means to help other people out, to give back to other people. So minimalism for me was pretty much a tool to prioritize my life so I could focus on those things, those important things, as opposed to focusing on stuff.
I think fundamentally no one can argue with the idea of focusing on the important things. What you're advocating, I guess, or what you are espousing with minimalism is, okay, I'm going to simplify my life so that I have time to focus on the important things, or that I focus on the important things. I don't let all these other things become distractions and detract my attention from all these important things. Um, but what about the hardest part, I guess, which comes with the concept of minimalism, which is, I guess, possessions and stuff and things,
Sure.
ownership, which is really what I think everybody seems to worry about when they say, yeah, minimalism. It's an interesting concept. I'd love to simplify my life, but I do need my this and I do need my that, and and I do identify. And this exact topic was discussed in your colleague Ryan's blog post, which I encourage everybody to read, and lots of other great essays that you guys have on your site. Minimalism, I think you said it best. Minimalism scares the shit out of us. So for those of us who for whom minimalism scares the shit out of, how do we reconcile all that? How can we reconcile the stuff part and the simplifying stuff, which fundamentally we agree with?
Yeah, it's funny because I was certainly the same way when I took this on. I think we tie a lot of our identity to our stuff, right? We become our stuff, and so the big house,
The car.
we having more bedrooms than inhabitants. I mean, we tend to do that. It's why do I have a three-bedroom house but I have two people living there, or why do I have two cars when I need one or maybe need none? Because we don't tend to question our things. So it's really scary at first because our identity's tied up in it. I always tell people there's three ways that they can approach minimalism. Because the there is a suitable way to do it for just about anyone. The most radical way is, you know what, you can rent a gigantic dumpster and throw as much stuff in there as you can fit, right? Just get rid of all your stuff and move on with your life. Um, while that sounds great, I know with me that wouldn't have worked because uh, I just had too much tied up emotionally in much of the stuff, especially
Hmm.
when it comes to sentimental items, which sometimes are the hardest to get rid of. Yeah, I wrote a fairly long essay about getting rid of my mother's stuff after she died, and for me that was really difficult. Questioning all my stuff, all the stuff I had. Why do we accumulate all of these things? Because it got to the point where I had so much stuff, I was accumulating things. I didn't really know what was important in my life. I didn't know what to focus on to live a happier, more content life. And so for me, getting rid of the stuff allowed me to focus on what is important. Things like my health, my relationships. I mean, if you think about it, we forsake our relationships every day. We spend 60, 70, 80 hours a week at work, and then the people we love, the people who are closest to us, we don't necessarily spend the time with them that they deserve. Things like our health. I weighed 70 pounds more than I do now. At 30, I'm in the best shape of my life, and that feels great. But before, I didn't have time to focus on my health. Um, I set it on the back burner. Things like pursuing what I'm passionate about. I didn't hate my job. In fact, I was really good at it, but I wasn't really passionate about it either. So I sort of found an exit plan over time. A few other things. Growing as an individual is something that's really important to me, and I felt like I wasn't really growing when I was accumulating all these things. In fact, stuff was preventing me from growing.
Mm.
And one of the most important things that we tend to talk a lot about is contributing beyond ourselves. There are so many ways to give back to other people, but when there's so much stuff in the way, you don't feel like you have the